Welcome to the Superconscious Success Podcast, where Jen and her Superconscious Success family co-hosts bring you valuable content each and every week on topics relating to manifestation, spirituality, and most of all, using your superconscious to manifest success in all areas of your life. Now on to today's episode.
Hey there, Superconscious Success fam. Just before we get into the interview, this is just a brief message. This is actually a recording of the 2021 Superconscious Success Summit interviews. If you do want to check out the introductory for all of the guests, then you can go across to our Superconscious Success YouTube channel where you'll be able to find all the introductions. These particular podcast interviews will be the interview only. Okay, thank you. Now let's get on to the interview. Hey there, Superconscious Success fam. Welcome back to another incredible interview on the Superconscious Success Super Summit. Today we're going to be talking to Fiona Williams, and she is an incredible teacher on A Course in Miracles, also known as ACIM. Today we are going to be going through some incredible content on the ego and the part that the ego plays in our spirituality and in manifesting that which we desire. If you have not yet visited her introductory talk and got her backstory and listened to all of that, be sure to head across to the Superconscious Success YouTube channel and listen to it, because she has got some incredible stories to tell you about how trusting in Source and surrendering to Source can actually help you to heal from different conditions and manifest that which you desire. So hi Fiona, how are you today?
Hello, I'm great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate it. I am a massive believer in A Course in Miracles. I myself and my friend Carl Gruber have a podcast out there called Your Spiritual Shift, which is based around A Course in Miracles. And you're actually our first guest on there, and I am so grateful to have you there. So if you haven't yet listened to that, then definitely go across and do that, because it's a real great introduction into A Course in Miracles and what it can actually do for you. So what we're going to do is, if I can ask you to first start off by explaining what A Course in Miracles is and why it really is an important book or audio program to consume.
Absolutely. So the course is A Course in Mind Training. It consists of a text, a workbook, and a manual for teachers, which includes a clarification of terms and so forth. It can look quite daunting because it's so large, but within the course we're guided through the ego's thought system, so we can begin to recognize the ego at work in our lives. And we're also guided very clearly on how to stop listening to the ego and correct the trajectory of our thinking towards our right mind. So we're given very clear instruction about the wrong mind of the ego and recognizing the right mind of spirit, where we're taught in the course, spirit is that connection, that inherent connection we have. And it is a path to enlightenment. It is one of thousands. And it does say that if it speaks to you, you will know. So you just kind of have to follow that intuition that perhaps this is for me, I'm interested in it, but it is a path to enlightenment. So once you're completed with the course, it's taught that you are a teacher of God or a teacher of Source, which is you are a demonstrator of just right-minded principles, thinking correctly, being more benign in the world, non-judgmental, more forgiving and loving. So it's an incredible path. It's a life's work. It even says at the end of the course that once you're done reading it, you're not done. You just begun a whole path.
Exactly. It's just a beginning to the journey. And A Course in Miracles is a program that can take years and years and years to go through and to reflect on. It's quite an intense course, but it is definitely one that's worth going through. Carl and I have created this program to try and simplify it a little bit. For people that are struggling with the content, because it is written in what type of text is it written in? It's in a very Yes, it's an interesting read. Let's just put it that way. I can't remember what
Shakespearean blank verse, and so it's very, it can be quite poetic.
Absolutely,
yeah.
and if that's not something that you're used to.
Yeah.
But what I want to start off with is, can you start off by defining non-dualism in reference to A Course in Miracles, and also the terms conscience, conscious, and consciousness, and the difference between them?
For sure. So non-dualism, according to the Course, is that you have the level here of the world where we have dualism, good, bad, black, white, salt, pepper, wet, dry, things like that. But that's the realm of the world. It's the ego's realm, where we also connect with spirit in this realm. But then you have up here, you have the level of source. And it is in that level, that's all love. Right? God is, period, right? And through spirit in this realm, because we recognize duality, what we're invited to do is that when we invite spirit into our experience, we're invited to see things in a non-dualistic manner. So, one of the greatest examples would be, right now we recognize that there's love and fear, but through the Course, fear is translated into a call for love. So you have love or a call for love, and the answer will always be love. So it gets rid of that dualistic kind of perspective where there's always these things butting heads, and it just kind of takes you out of that realm and just goes, this is just the ego's thought system, and you respond with love. So it just really takes that battle of dualism out of it. And just when our minds are perceiving, which is what we do in the world, up here at the level of God or love or source, the mind knows. It only wills to know. That's its function. Whereas here in this world, the mind perceives, and it will always perceive differences, levels, duality. So it's an ego tactic, duality, to keep us entrenched in the world.
Right. So what would be the difference? What is your definition of ego, and how does the ego, what role does it play according to A Course in Miracles?
So the ego is misthought, so mistaken thought. In the Course, we are taught all about it because we are faced with it. We believe that we are the ego because we made the ego. And so because we believe we made it, we're quite loyal to it. So the Course does, point out its laws of chaos, the ego's laws of chaos, and how it functions within this world. But we're recognizing that all of that is just a mistake in our thinking. So we're taught not to befriend the ego. We're taught not to make an enemy of the ego, just to simply recognize that it is nothing. A mistake in my thinking that requires correction. That's it. End of story. So we don't want to make more of it. And that's definitely the Course perspective of it. Like, look, this is it. This is all the stuff it comes with, but you don't need to feed into it anymore. So yeah, I always like to describe the ego as being misthought.
Okay, so how do we let go of that ego in order for us to listen to what our higher self is trying to tell us?
So you would want to do that through true forgiveness, which is an advanced form of forgiveness. A Course in Miracles, as I mentioned earlier, is a path to enlightenment, but it is the quickest path to enlightenment. It's one of the unique features of the Course is it really expedites your enlightenment, and that's because it does have that advanced form of true forgiveness within it. So people who are, familiar with the Course, there's an exercise at the end of chapter 5 in the text. It's known as the page 90 exercise. In the Foundation for Inner Peace's version of the Course. But so essentially that will be an excellent guide through true forgiveness for you, where you recognize that you're responding to something with the ego because you're upset. You take responsibility. That was my mistake. And then you turn on over to your right mind and you go, Holy Spirit or Jesus or JC, whatever works for you. You just turn it over and just say, will you judge this for me? Because I don't know how to judge. Ego, Fiona, does not know how to judge. So Spirit, you got to take this one for me because I'm upset and that was my mistake. So you get Spirit to judge it for you. And then the final step would be accepting the atonement, which is I never left my source. So the atonement is that one idea that corrects all ego ideas. The ego is separation, saying we separated from our source. Whereas the atonement and spirit is like, you never left your source. You just need to remember that. So you always end true forgiveness with the acceptance of the atonement. And that would be a great way to expedite your enlightenment and face your challenges. Yeah, that's definitely how the Course approaches it.
Excellent. And so you were talking about judgment and that our ego doesn't know how to judge. How do we deal with emotions such as guilt and shame and judgment, and how do we move past that by listening to our higher self? Because can you explain the connection between those emotions and our source?
Absolutely. So guilt is actually the number one core emotion that we're actually dealing with. It is the beating heart behind all emotions that you would deem as negative. So in our world, guilt can look different. It can look like anger, sadness, depression, anxiety. I mean, if you are anxious about running into a bear in the forest, you wouldn't necessarily think that's guilt, but at a very deep part of your mind, in your unconscious mind, it is based off of guilt, which is, again, that one idea where I think I left my source, and I feel horrible for that. And when we come up to our more conscious mind experience, which is our daily life experience, that guilt looks so different. And that's an ego tactic to kind of keep us away from correcting that one idea that would heal our minds, and the ego would be eradicated. So the ego in survival mode says, hey, no, that's not guilt. That's, you're mad at that person, or that person flipped you off in traffic, or whatever it might be, you stubbed your toe. But at the source of it all, it really is guilt. So when we look at our emotions as course students or spiritual students, we kind of want to recognize that there's a deeper dynamic going on in our minds. It's not just, I can't get that job, or I can't find the right relationship. There is something deeper at work there. And it is that guilt over thinking that we left our source, because our connection with our source is the source of our health, our abundance, our happiness, essentially a healthy mind. And so when the ego tries to distract you from recognizing your connection with source, you're going to experience a plethora of emotions, which would include that shame. I'm not worthy. I don't deserve this. Abundance is just something that doesn't happen for me, whatever it might be. So the ego just likes to make problems. You know, it's not about being a millionaire. It's not about having the perfect relationship. It's about inner peace. It's about having your mind healed and knowing that you are something so much bigger than the ego would ever tell you that you are. You are a child of God. You are everything. And you deserve to know that.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's important to understand that that there is unlimited potential and unlimited possibilities for all of us. And
Absolutely.
Source only wants the best for us. Yeah. And when we do disconnect from that of Source, then, like you said, we start to feel the emotions like shame and guilt and judgment of ourselves. And I think that because our higher self only ever believes good in us. Yeah. It doesn't know any different to that. And it is our ego. When you start to feel these feelings of guilt and shame and depression and anxiety, like you said, it's a disconnection from what Source is trying to, Source is trying to get to us. We're disconnected from that. So we let go of our ego. What's a good way of doing that in terms of, do you do that through meditation? Is there a way that you can connect to Source through that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, Spirit speaks to us individually in our own minds in ways that is a perfect taste for each of us. My mom meditates for an hour every morning. That's her bag. She loves it. Me, no, I don't want to meditate for an hour. But I personally love frequent 1 minute or 2 minute connection points with Source throughout the day. works for me. So, you have to recognize that what works for someone else may not really work for you, right? Some people it's gardening and they just feel that bliss, that peacefulness, really, when you're following that genuine happiness, God's will for you is perfect happiness. That is an ACIM lesson. God's will for me is perfect happiness. So when you're feeling that happiness, that genuine peace, that bliss, that is your connection to source trickling through your experience here in the physical world. So honestly, I would say whatever makes you feel genuinely at peace, genuinely happy, that is the way for you. And personally, I do you can only hear spirit through a quiet mind, because the ego it's very insecure and it gets very, very threatened, because it survives off of our mind's power and our belief in it. So when we stop believing in the ego, it gets very upset. So I always like to compare it as like to a matador, to a bull. And so like we're the bull and the ego's like, hey, over here, and so it is really important that you learn to quiet your mind. As we're taught in the course, the ego always speaks first and speaks loudest. And that's because it's just like, hey, I need you to believe in me so I can stay alive. So, hey, look at me. So personally, I like to recognize that when my mind's super chatty, or, maybe I'm hung up on something someone said, or, even from like 10 years ago, right? All those memories come up and you're like, why am I still thinking about that? Or those feelings of unworthiness, like especially around a business or whatever, like who am I to do this? Things like that. That's just the ego just trying to keep your attention. And that's personally how I like to kind of frame the ego, as like, you're just trying to get my attention so I can keep you alive. And when you start to recognize that's what the ego is trying to do, it becomes really transparent in its agenda. And it's easier for you to just kind of back off and go, I know what you're trying to do there. It looks very tempting because that's a pain body for me, as Eckhart Tolle would say, that's a pain body. But I don't need to play anymore. What if I corrected my thinking? What if I connected with spirit? Then I could actually heal this story and I could feel better. And I can, be more genuine self, that happy self. So we want to quiet our minds more often. However you do that, that's perfect for you. Absolutely.
Yeah. Because I know with me, the way that I do it is through my afternoon walk.
Ooh, nice.
And because it is a time that is just for me and for my source, it's a time for me to reflect. And that's when I get a lot of my downloads. That's when my intuition really kicks in, because it's when I am most connected to source. And it's a walk. It's interesting. It's a walk that I go on every afternoon. It is purely for me. Nobody else is invited, except for my higher self. And we, that's a time for us to connect. And for, like I say, this is when you will start to hear what God or source or Jesus or whatever you name source is bringing to you. And like Fiona says, it doesn't matter what it is, it's whatever brings you joy. Some people will actually get these downloads and get this connection through music. Yes. Because that's when they're at the highest vibration. Yeah. I love my music, and I have a playlist of positive, inspirational songs that lift me up. And I'll find after listening to that, then I also get a lot of downloads coming through. So whatever you can do to get you to that place of joy and happiness and peace. Dance around the room and act silly. It doesn't matter, just get to that place, because that's when you're going to start to connect. So now, how do we, we often go through life and we spend our time worrying. Worry is an emotion that we spend like so much time worrying about money, worrying about health, worrying about our kids, worrying about our parents. How can we let go of that worry by beginning to trust that Source is going to provide for us? Source is going to make sure that we are living our best path. How do we do that?
Well, personally, I always, when I catch myself worrying, I always like to say, this moment's going to pass by anyway. Yeah. So how are you going to do it? How are you going to think about it? So, I know it's very logical to go worry or having a panic attack is not going to prevent whatever I'm afraid about,
Yeah.
It's just an energy that you're feeling and you're allowing to come through. And so it is in your power. I think it's important to recognize that it's within your power to stop worry. We're taught in the course so many times, it's just reinforced so many times that your thinking is a choice. When your mind wanders, that's a choice. Things like that. And it's certainly, like, I just like disclaimer, do not feel guilty if that happens. We all deal with it, but just to recognize, oh, my mind's wandering, la, 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 things like that. So personally, I just kind of like to take the sting out of, worry just by going, you know what, this is where I'm at right now, but I'm willing to correct and get stronger, because the ego is a habit. And as we made the ego, we can stop identifying with it, and we can create, as I like to call, the right-minded habit. I can just go, whoa, there's the ego. I'm switching on over to my right mind, because you're the only thing you're doing with the present moment when you're worried is you're just polluting it.
Yeah, you're
with
yeah,
and I always like to say, you're taking stuff from your past, you're thinking about it now, and you're projecting it into your future, and that creates a lot of fear. So just recognizing what we're doing, is it genuinely of value? No. So I just feel it's important to kind of recognize that, call it for what it is, call it out. Also, I think it's important to remember that in the course, we're taught that the Holy Spirit, which is, we're taught as the voice for God, right? It's the answer to the ego, is always there. And we're asked in the course to refer to it as your higher self, capital H, capital S, higher self. It is you. We're taught in the course that the Holy Spirit is in you in a very literal way. So when you see something happening that you're worried about, you're afraid about, whatever it might be, it's important to kind of take a step back, and you can kind of activate what I call the decision maker mind, where I'm aware of both possibilities of fear and connecting with spirit. And when I know I have that choice, I know I'm going to bugger it up doing it on my own with the ego. So if that's the case, I want to get better and I want to heal my mind, I'm going to choose spirit. So it starts to become more of a habit where you take more moments of peace and go, wait a minute, what am I feeding into here? Spirit, can you take care of this one for me? And the more you do that, even with the small stuff, and then it's easier to do with the big stuff, just as they say, that's how you create habits. Just do it. Just try it, because application is necessary. If you want to get the benefits of the course, you have to apply it. That's cause and effect. You can't get the loving effects if you don't apply the cause. And cause is at the level of the mind. So you have to do something. And so those smaller things that you start to worry about, very easy to go, hey, HS, can you help me out here? Right? What would a higher self Fiona say about this? And then you just start to develop that habit, and you start to see the effects that spirit is with you. And then it becomes desirable.
Absolutely.
Right?
And so what happens once you stop listening to the ego and you start to listen more to the higher self? Does the ego start to get squashed? And do people actually get to the point that the ego does die, and now we're just left with our higher self and with source? And what happens during that process?
Yeah, for sure. So enlightenment does occur while you're within a body.
Yep.
This physical world is our classroom, which is another, helpful thing to remember when you are worrying.
Yeah.
To just go, wait a minute, this is my classroom. If I'm going to do it anywhere, I'm going to do it here. I'm going to learn. I'm going to reinforce this. So, Jesus always says in his course, why wait? Mm-hmm. What are you waiting for? How about now? Nudge, nudge, so, I do firmly believe that if you start to recognize that you do have that choice, genuinely have that choice of how you're going to feed into these thoughts. Thoughts are investments, and illusions are investments. So what am I valuing here? How am I going to move forward? That is your genuine choice in this world. So when you start to see this world as a classroom, you start to use it as such. And so then it's not things are being done to me, things are being done for me, right? So even Jesus says in his course, you know, it takes great awareness to realize that all things are happening for your good. And that is, you know, an incredible mental step to take, but it is true. So when you start to recognize that, you want to do the work and you want to start applying these course principles.
Absolutely. And I like to, every time I start to sort of like, I find my mind wander or start to worry, or something happens, an adversity happens that we didn't expect. And I just tell myself, look, this happened for a reason. Everything happens for a reason. And more often than not, it's put me on a different path. It's directed me to where I needed to go. And if you've ever read the book, The Game of Life, it's a really cool, easy to read book, which just talks about how life is a game. Life is for us to enjoy, for starters, but it's also for us to learn from, because A Course in Miracles shows that our job here on this earth is to expand. Our job here is for our consciousness to expand, for us to learn different lessons, and you know, so if we take it a bit more lightly and we start to look at life like that, as opposed to this is how it should be, these are the expectations, and we spend so much of our time trying to be focused on what others expect of us, that we tend to lose ourselves, and that's also the ego talking to us. So I think once you can get to that place where you're no longer listening to the ego, and now it's your higher self talking through, that's when you can really reach the enlightened state.
Absolutely. And it is important to recognize that with the ego, all we want to do is undo it. That's what A Course in Miracles is teaching. You know, like I said, you don't want to fight it. You know, some people say, oh, my ego's working hard today. Wow. What an identification with the ego. Like that is in phrases not going to help you, you know, because you just gave it life. You know, it's important to recognize that the ego is surviving through your mind's belief in it. And, you know, we're taught in the course that just as you're vigilant for the ego, you can be vigilant for the truth. So what are you doing? Right. So you really want to recognize that you're undoing the ego very gently. It is a process, but you're doing it with spirit. You're doing it with the one who knows, can see everything. So you're never going to go wrong. And, you know, of course, we're going to go through our trials, because those are our lessons. You know, since I picked up the course, wow, you know, I've been through a lot. Meniere's disease, PTSD, you know, and then just things, you know, going on with my family and things like that. So it feels like a lot, but you know that it's for a reason. It's because you're ready. You're so ready to do it. And, you know, when you start to undo the ego kind of claws and is like, come back, I need you. And it can amp up a bit. But again, if you just remain vigilant, it is well worth getting to that point of going, ego, no. Spirit, yes.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, I always believe that Source is never going to put us in a situation we cannot handle.
Yeah. Oh, so true.
Yeah. So no matter how big the adversity seems, no matter how much trauma we've gone through, remember that you are a powerful person that is the Son of God, that is capable of anything. And so God is never going to put you in a situation that you cannot handle. It's, you know, you've got to have faith in yourself. You've got to have faith in your higher self, and recognize that all of these doubts that come up, all of these, I can't do it, I'm not capable, it's not possible, that is your ego talking. And at this point, this is when you say, ego, enough. And then you push it away. And then you go, okay, it's time now for my higher self to come in and to help you in whatever situation you're dealing with, like your Meniere's disease. Because it's capable. Healing is capable within all of us.
Yes.
We can heal from
Yeah.
anything that comes up, but
Yeah.
only if you trust that source is going to help you through it.
Exactly. And it's why you're here. You
Mhm.
know, it's why you're here. You're here to learn.
Yeah.
You know, it's even in the 50 Principles of Miracles at the beginning of the course. This is your classroom. You are here to learn. That is what time is for.
Yeah.
So use it correctly. So you always kind of want to be aware of how you're using time. This is what's come up. HS has shown me what my own ego content is in my mind, and you know, knows that if I connect to spirit, I can do this, I can get through it. So I always like to say that the ego will keep you in it. Spirit will get you through it.
Yeah. Because
right?
the ego is just about protection. The
Yeah,
ego is about protecting itself.
itself, not you,
Not
itself.
itself. It's about self-preservation.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that just means that your desire for connection with source has to be even stronger.
Yeah.
But as you do connect on a deeper level by living in a state of joy, this is
Yeah.
how we connect, because our connection to source is based on our feeling, it's based on our emotions of joy.
Yeah.
And so the more that we stay in that vibration, the
Yeah.
easier it is to hear what source has got to say to us, and life begins to flow. Life begins to live in ease, and even those adversities that we go through, because I'm not saying that you're not going to have challenges.
Yeah.
But wouldn't life be boring if we didn't have challenges?
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's face it, if we didn't have things that we had to learn from,
Yeah.
then we would stay at the same place our entire life and we wouldn't evolve.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know,
That's so true.
Yeah. So, wow, this has been a real exciting conversation about the ego, and about how we can begin to, as you say, just not give it the attention that it wants, because that's what it wants. It wants the attention. It wants to know that we see it.
It needs you.
Yeah. And once it starts to feel like, she doesn't need me so much anymore, then sometimes, like Fiona said, sometimes it will amp up.
Yep.
And sometimes you'll start to experience anxieties and depressions and negative thoughts, and but know that source is there to help you through it, to guide you through it. Keep that trust, keep that belief, and know that you know it's okay. It's okay. Go and read the Course in Miracles, or at least start it, because it can take a long time. Or listen to the amazing audio program. Fiona's got some great resources on her website too that I noticed when I went to your website. If you want to learn more about it, we've got Your Spiritual Shift that Carl and I are just creating, which will actually be out by the time this summit is launched. So just check it out, because it is definitely worth it. Start to really work on focusing on the higher self and focusing a lot less on the ego. Thank you so much, Fiona. I have really loved this. And before we go, would you like to tell our listeners where they can find you, where they can find your amazing clothing brand that you now have?
Thank you.
Because you didn't mention that in your intro.
Oh, that's right.
And also where they can find your books.
For sure. Yeah. So you can find my work and online classes at www.fionamaria.ca. You can find my clothing line at www.intinn.ca. And you can find my children's books both on my Fiona Maria site, also on www.healthyhappyminds.ca, where I have more children's products there as well, like my card decks and posters and nice things like that to help everyone think right-mindedly. And you can also buy my books on Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com, Chapters Indigo, if you're in Canada. Yeah, so it's out there.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today, Fiona.